because I understand that is more or less what my remit or the focus of this meeting is about.
Exactly.
Yes. So in terms of technologies that are currently, especially intrusive in nature, that are pervasive on the continent, there are quite a number of examples, and we could see some in the International Mobile Subscriber Identity IMSI catchers, Finfisher, Celebrite, and the most recent new kid on the block and popular one, Pegasus. These technologies basically are usually deployed built most of the time by private sector, international private sector. We have instances of, for example, Israeli-based firms and also EU-based firms that are whose remit is to manufacture and produce these technologies. And most of the time, we always find out that these technologies, when they are deployed on the continent, there are rarely any form of scrutiny from any stakeholder. And as a result of that, these technologies have become super pervasive. And examples, countries, for example, that use, IMSI catchers in Africa include Algeria, Botswana, South Africa, Gabon, Morocco, Namibia, Nigeria, and a host of others. While there are also reports, for example, that software such as Finfisher has shut down, African countries that used it while it shut down include also Nigeria, Uganda, and others. Countries that use Celebrite in Africa include Botswana, Nigeria, and Ghana. In African countries also that used Pegasus, Ghana, Morocco, Togo, and Rwanda. Oftentimes, these tools are purchased under the guise of combating crime, which is a legitimate basis under international human rights law. However, as a result of lack of transparency and accountability by state actors who deploy these tools, they are often used to target journalists, media practitioners, and political activists and opposition instead. So I'm going to pause for now with respect to the influx and the nature of surveillance technologies in Africa.
Thank you so much, Dr. Tomia, for taking us on that journey. You've really shown that this is an African problem because we've seen it cutting across all the regions from Botswana to Morocco in the north to Nigeria, Ghana in the west. So we find out that we can comfortably say that this is an African problem, seen from what Dr. Tomio has laid before us and the spread of the use of these technologies. I'm coming to you, Mr. Adeboye. I know you have an extensive experience advocating for digital rights. If I'm wrong, for not less than 9 years now. If I'm not wrong, for not less than 9 years now. And we want to know. And I know that over this time, you've come across some of these technologies and their impact that Dr. Tomiwa mentioned above. What are some of the key challenges that we've observed regarding the deployment of these surveillance technologies, especially as it has to do with digital rights of citizens?
All right, thank you for the question. I think there's a lot to unpack from the conversation and even from the response that was given by Dr. Ilori earlier. Number one, he did mention the pervasiveness of this technology, the lack of transparency, and the lack of accountability. I speak from the perspective of a practitioner, somebody who has engaged on the issue, who has demanded accountability, who has asked for transparency, and as a matter of fact, initiated lawsuits to kind of, force the hands of the authorities to kind of be transparent, about their investment in surveillance capacity and technology generally. And the first challenge you would see is that in Africa, because we are contextualizing this in our continent, right?
Yes.
In Africa, we are dealing with certain issues, security challenges. I come from Nigeria, and I think from about 2010, kidnapping, terrorism became a big thing. There were a lot of security challenges in that context, and also citizens wanted to feel safe. So when government, go for this technology, they usually declare that they are doing it so that everybody can be safe. And that's like the narrative that is put out there. But then what you then find is that, number one, nobody really understands what this technology are actually being used for. Also, some of the things we found out is that this technology are actually used even for political ends. We have clear examples of where incumbent government have used this technology to monitor their political opponents, in a very clearly illegitimate use of those technologies. So what we have seen, as a matter of fact, is that this technology came into the continent, or became attracted to the continent, because there were security challenges. And then when you are looking at this issue, you don't just look at the government and civic actors. You also look at the contractors, the guys who are selling the technology, who are after the business. So there is this interaction between the government and the private companies or the contractors selling this thing. And when they go to approach the government, they talk to the government about how this thing can help them, address security challenges, etc., and all of that. Then the government secretly buys this thing. In fact, one of the interesting things we find out is that when these things are purchased, if you are the type that does a lot of work looking at the budget documents, they don't actually put the name of this technology in the budget document. So they put a pseudonym so that it doesn't trigger civic rights activists to start asking questions. So you might not even know, you might be looking at your country's budget, but you don't know that a lot of money is being budgeted for surveillance technology. So this is one of the issues, that there is a lot of opacity around, the practices of acquiring surveillance capacity. So aside that, when you then have some information that this is happening, then you ask questions. So one of the things we have done is to send freedom online FOI request, that's a freedom of information request. And the usual response is that, this is a national security issue. Why are you so interested? So interested, interested in the topic. So what we have seen is a lot of opacity around the issues, lack of transparency, lack of accountability, lack of judicial oversight, lack of legislative frameworks around it. And that's why it's concerning for those of us who work in digital rights to say that if you have such huge capacity, for surveillance capacity, and nobody knows exactly what you are doing with it, you are not accountable to anybody in terms of how you are using it, then we have a huge problem in front of us. While we understand that we have genuine security concerns, but we also know that beyond the security concerns, these things will be used for other purposes. And I always say this: if something is, if there is a likelihood that something can be abused, it will be abused, unless some people are working so hard to ensure that it doesn't get abused. And I think that's the situation for how surveillance is deployed on the continent.
Thank you so much. So one key word there, like you mentioned, is lack of legislative framework to be able to check the excesses of governments while deploying this.
Absolutely.
And we see that almost across Africa.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Mr. Duboye. Thank you so much. Dr. Boshe, and we've seen how the conversation is going, and it gives me, it raises concerns. I'm going to come from this angle. I know we talk about interdisciplinary approaches and strategies in doing some of these things. Three things I'm seeing here in what we are talking about. We are seeing law, we are seeing technology, we are seeing the society. So how can we find a meeting point for these three? Why over this conversation? Because you remember we are talking about striking a balance. How can we bring the law, this technology we are talking about, and the society, which is where the citizens, where the impact of this, who this technology impacts, how can we come to an intersection?
Thank you for the question. I think I'll go back to the first presentation, I think, where they were discussing health systems.
Yes.
The balance always comes when you have proper frameworks, proper frameworks within the country or within, let's say, in this case, on the continent. We have, for example, and this is very unfortunate for Africa, we rushed and sort of reform our data protection frameworks and privacy frameworks. And most of our frameworks follows the European Union approach, that is the GDPR. Little did we know that the GDPR came as a twin. It didn't come alone. When they enacted the GDPR, there's a twin regulation that is specific regulating the surveillance. So we adopted the GDPR for data protection, but we ignored or we give less emphasis on the regulation or surveillance activities, whether it's for law enforcement activities, criminal justice enforcement, whether it's for government purposes. We do not have that framework. We sort of ignored it. So we do not have that balance that the European Union has. That is one aspect. Another aspect is that we are rushing also into technology, and this is not avoidable. We have to, because the world is moving into digital economy, digital space. We have to be there. We cannot ignore that on the basis that we do not have proper legal framework to regulate technology. But then again, I do not see much effort being put into advancing skills for users, because the users of technology is coming so fast, and the knowledge to use those technology in a way that a person is able to sort of protect their privacy is not imparted in the community as the speed of the technology that is being adopted. And so that is another problem. But I'll also say one more thing is that I believe striking a balance between community or society use of technology, surveillance of community activities, and deployment of technology or innovation gadgets needs the working together of the government, the community, and community organizations that are working with the community, that are on ground working with the community, because they are the ones who knows what is happening in the community. The government is there for the people, representing the people needs, but in most cases we've seen the government does not work from the grassroots, but the community organizations, like we, Jamii Forums, we work with people, we speak with people from the ground roots, and we know what they need in terms of communications, in terms of what need to be regulated, what are challenges for them to access technology without being unnecessarily surveilled or without their rights to privacy or data protection being infringed by the government. So I think there's a need for governments, which include legislators and law enforcement, to come together and speak about the challenges that are facing communities. But how do you know, how do the government, law enforcement agencies and legislature knows what exactly is happening on ground? They need community organizations to come and tell them that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 are the pertinent issues in the community that needs to be given priority.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. You said a lot. What I kept hearing here is in the development of these legal frameworks that will help in creating balance, there's need to apply the bottom-up approach, where we get the people, the users who these things are going to impact most, involved in the process of developing this framework that is going to guide the use of this. Thank you so much, Dr. Bosch. Thank you. Dr. Laurie, I'm going to come back to you once more, because there's this trend that happened with things in Africa where we come to places like this, we'll keep talking about the problem, the challenges, the problem. But I'm one person that think that Africa, we've come to the point where we shouldn't only be talking about the problems. We should be looking at what can we do to remedy the situations. So, based on your research and your experience, Dr. Laurie, can you give us some example of best practices that you think that countries in this region, more especially from those countries where you mentioned that these technologies are being deployed now, what are some example of best practices we can apply to remedy the impact of this surveillance, the negative impact of these surveillance technologies that are being deployed?
Thank you very much, Ihueze, for your question. In terms of best practices, unfortunately, I'll be very careful in terming this as best practices. I would rather say maybe there are specific, super narrow examples that we can look at, rather. And this is because surveillance as an area of study, as I've come to understand it so far, is quite broad. And when we speak of best practices, what are we referring to? Best practices as a result of the law in its application, implementation, the actors involved. So that was why I said I'm going to use a more narrower application to your question. In terms of an example that could be looked at, for example, when it comes to ensuring proper oversight systems, especially when it comes to prior judicial approval of surveillance requests by state actors, I would suggest the provisions, and I also must point out that the law I'm about to refer to is also problematic in many ways. And there's a recent court case has now been decided upon by the Constitutional Court of South Africa. So the law I'm referring to here is the Regulation of Interception of Communications Act of 2002 in South Africa. There's a particular section under that law, Section 7, subsection 4, that requires a judge to carry out the judicial review of surveillance requests by state actors. That is an example, a narrow example of applying prior judicial authorization of surveillance requests. In most countries where you find laws on interception of communications or communication surveillance, there are rarely such, provisions. And where you find such provisions, there are also no clear implementation or monitoring strategy that are put in place. And also that is, given a national example that, other countries that I've mentioned earlier can look at when it comes to designing laws for regulating interception of communication. I'll move quickly now to a regional standard that can be applied, which is a little bit broader with respect to designing legal solutions for communication surveillance in Africa. And I refer you to Principle 41 of the revised Declaration on Principles of Freedom of Expression and Access to Information in Africa, on the required adequate safeguards that must be put in place through a law. The revised declaration was very clear, through a law with respect to privacy and communication surveillance. And these safeguards are 6 in number. Of course, they can be more, but they are 6 in number according to that revised declaration. The first one is a prior authorization, like the one I described earlier, of an independent and impartial judicial authority. The second one is a due process safeguard. The third is specific limitation on the time, manner, place, and scope of the surveillance. The fourth is notification of the decision authorizing surveillance within a reasonable time of the conclusion of such surveillance. The fifth is proactive transparency on the nature and scope of the use of such surveillance. And the sixth is effective monitoring and regular review by an independent oversight mechanism. Let me harp a little bit more on the last requirement. As I speak to you right now, while countries, I think like Namibia and a few others who have some policies or regulation with respect to interception of communication surveillance, I am not aware of any independent oversight mechanism with respect to communication surveillance in Africa. And that is to tell you of how long we need to go with respect to reforms and getting things right, at least on the legal aspect of communication surveillance. We'll move also quickly now to the an international standard that can be used as best standard in when we are talking about regulation of surveillance technologies in Africa. And I'm referring to the UN Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights, especially under Pillar 1. Of course, there's Pillar 1, state duty to protect. There's Pillar 2 on respect for human rights by businesses, and there's Pillar 3, which must ensure access to remedy. But I want to just focus on Pillar 1. All these pillars apply to communication surveillance, but I want to just focus on Pillar 1 with respect to state duty to protect against indiscriminate use of surveillance technologies. And this usually involves coming up, and as I would call it, primary, dedicated, and elaborate legal standards when it comes to communication surveillance. Of course, I know that is a very, very long way to go, especially considering how critical and very contentious and also secretive the nature of communication surveillance in Africa is. It's a very difficult conversation to have with states, but at the same time, we do not, because of conversations are difficult, avoid them. But in my view, these three suggestions are one of many ways we can begin to think about, especially legal reform when it comes to communication surveillance practices in Africa. I'll stop there for now. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. You've said a lot. Like I said earlier on, I'm so happy because I know that a lot of people, both here and online, they are listening to us, and we are hopeful that most of these solutions that you provide, that the people who is in their destiny to put it into use, to put it into action, will take note of them. Adibu, I'm coming back to you. I know we are in this trend of emerging AI revolution, which is what we can call it now, going on, which for me is a sister to the conversation we are having over surveillance. In the spirit of also providing solutions, what ethical considerations do you think? Because we know that, from, like I said, they are twin. What ethical considerations should government and even private sector participants or agents apply when we are thinking of deploying these technologies, especially in Africa, our continent?
Okay, thank you very much for the question. Emerging technologies, as you put it, like a sister to surveillance technology. And I think it also helps to bring to fore the fact that some of these emerging technologies also have surveillance capabilities. And I think when we talk about the conversation we've had so far, we focus so much about government carrying out surveillance. But some of the technologies we have today has even empowered private actors to also be able to, maybe not at a large scale, but in many ways, be able to carry out even surveillance activity. There are people are selling, if you go to even Apple App Store or the Android one, there are probably softwares you can buy to monitor your partners, your colleagues at the office, etc. So as the world embraces new technologies, there would be that concern, there will be that real threat to intrusion of privacy because some of these technologies are so intrusive and have a lot of surveillance capacities. Airports are installing technologies that are very intrusive in nature. So it's great to have this conversation. But in terms of ethical consideration, I don't think we can divorce that from, I don't think we can divorce consideration for ethical consideration. I mean, ethical issues. We cannot divorce it from the legality of many of these things as well. Because I recall several years ago, that was 2018, we joined a couple of other organizations to work on what is known as the Toronto Declaration on Artificial Intelligence. And at that time, the conversation was that AI was going to have a lot of ethical impact, and there are ethics that must be respected and all of that. But just barely after we did that work, the group came to a conclusion that, you know what, ethics is not universal. So when you talk about ethical consideration, ethics according to whose ethics? So we still have to find a way to link that conversation to legality, which can be more universal in terms of its application. So what I think is important is that, you know, on our continent, and I speak more from a practitioner perspective, we have Dr. Ilori and Dr. Bosch, who are academics, and they might be more analytical in how they respond to these issues. I speak purely based on my experience as a practitioner. In our continent, we have a situation whereby the people who hold the power they don't necessarily understand technology. So technology is usually seen as a myth, as something that provides solution to all problems. So even sometimes when our leaders purchase surveillance technology, it's because the way it is sold to them, they see it as the answer to all the problems they've had. This is what the contractors, something they succeed at doing. I think a starting point is for us to understand that technology is not the magical one that solves our problem. So sometimes there are technologies that we are not even ready for as a people, but probably because we see it in Europe, we see it in America, we think it's okay to also have it in our jurisdiction as well. So that conversation is very important. So when a technology is being introduced to our system, do we really need this technology at this point in time? I mean, a clear case in question is the digital identity craze that is going on the continent. Everybody, every country wants to implement digital ID systems. There's a lot of influence from Europe for Africa to implement digital ID systems. And we are seeing a lot of, trial by error approach. We are seeing a lot of issues around that implementation. Even for many countries without a data privacy law, we have digital ID systems because this technology are being sold as, once you do this, you're going to be able to solve all your problems. And one of the questions we've asked, because in Nigeria, I come from Nigeria, and surveillance conversation we've been having it since 2012. The first time we asked the Nigerian government about the surveillance acquisition or capacity, surveillance capacity, was 2012. We said, why are you spending so much money on surveillance? And the answer at the time was that, with this technology, we are going to solve our crimes issue, we are going to solve our terrorism issue. We are still dealing with terrorism in 2023, which means that this is not a magic one that just solves problem because you apply it. That means that all the conversation around the urgency of why this has to be done now, it's not necessary. It's just a business approach for the surveillance contractor to be able to sell what they're trying to sell. So we need to really have, we need to have that mindset whereby we say nothing is urgent. Acquiring this technology is not urgent. We need to do, human rights impact assessment. How does this technology affect the people? What are the dark side of this technology? How do we mitigate it? And I was having this conversation recently with somebody back home, and I said, see, one of the challenges we have is that we go and get this technology, and then when we start seeing the dark side, the negative impact, then we start thinking, how do we mitigate this impact? What we should have done is, before even getting the technology, to look at what are the dangers of this technology, because they are two-edged swords, right? They have two sides to them. So we need to look at that, even right from the outset, to say that what potential harm can this technology do to us, and how might we, mitigate these harms? So I think that's one of the things that need to happen. I don't speak a lot to ethics. I love to speak more about legality. I also love to speak more about reality in terms of where are we as a people. This technology, and I mean, if there is any surveillance contractor listening to this now, they will not like me for saying this. But the reality is that these guys, making this technology, there is a way they force us to buy it. They make us think that once we have it, our problems are solved, which is false, which is lie. And that's why there needs to be a lot of consultation, even on the part of government, in terms of when you are trying to acquire some of this capacity. You need to talk to many stakeholders, people who can bring other perspective, people who can show you the other side of this technology, because the guy who wants to make money will never tell you this thing can also hurt your system, can hurt your people, or can have other implications. And I say this to government actors all the time. A lot of times, the politician or the political leader who acquire this technology is not even the one that will use it for ulterior purposes. So you are in government, you are a governor, you are a president, you acquire this technology, then another person becomes president and they use it even against you. So you are a potential victim of the same technology that you are buying without creating mitigation around it. So what I would say is that beyond ethics, we have to look at legality, justification. We were having this conversation just yesterday about what is good surveillance and what is bad surveillance. And I like to think that I don't like to see surveillance from the perspective of good and bad. I don't even think surveillance is good for any reason. It's just an evil we have to manage because of potential good it can bring. I like to look at surveillance from the perspective of what is legal surveillance, what is illegal surveillance, not what is good or what is bad. The reason is that by the time you begin to say some surveillance is good, you are providing justification for surveillance. But by the time you are able to make the argument to say that this surveillance, is it legitimate? And when I say legitimate, is it justifiable? Do we really need it? That's the kind of question we should be asking. And if you don't ask the right questions, then we can spend days, months, years talking about the wrong thing. But it is very important that the right questions are being asked. And I don't think in any conversation around surveillance, the issue of whether it is good or bad should be what we should be discussing. The question should be, is this legal? Is it legitimate? Is there a justification for it? Is there an oversight around it? Is there a judicial oversight around it? And that's what tells us whether the surveillance in question is necessary or not. So, legality for me, not ethics.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Before I'll go to the audience, Dr. Boshen, I see the way I see I have a quality panel here, and I see the way the conversation is going. The conversation is going, and I said I am overjoyed, and I hope that the people, because one of the reasons why we do these things is not to come up here and have a talk show. It's just to provide solutions so that people listening to us, so that both here and online, are going to learn from the solutions that are being profiled from this platform. Has it been all gloomy? I'm coming to you, Dr. Has it been all gloomy? So, please, are there anywhere we have seen rays of light, especially as it has to do with development around data privacy and protection on the continent?
Yes, I will say that. Despite my statement before, I said in Africa we concentrated on data protection and forgot about the surveillance, like our counter European Union. Dr. Ilori mentioned a case from South African court, Constitutional Court. I think it's, he will correct me if I'm wrong, it's a Mabunga case of 2019 or something. That case provided 4 qualities or 4 sort of principles to be able to determine whether or not surveillance is legal, as my colleague here is saying. So you have to be able to determine what surveillance is legal. You have to look at whether that surveillance is allowed by any law. I mean, a law should provide that in this circumstance, a police officer or a government officer is allowed to surveil these kind of activities. That is 1. 2, after you have the law, you need to have justification. Is the means I'm using for surveillance justified, necessary, and proportional in a democratic society? That is number 2. Number 3, you have to ask yourself, before I start surveilling, is there an oversight mechanism? Is there a judge, an independent judge? In this case, insisted an independent judge is not just a judge who is in the court, but a judge who was elected through transparency process. And this judge will oversee the whole surveillance activities to make sure that it doesn't go beyond the limit that is provided by the law. And lastly, the fourth aspect is that, does the person being surveilled has a remedy in case the surveillance is done beyond what is required by law? I have a vivid example, fortunately, and I'm going to blow my trumpet in this one. 3-4 years ago, there was an incident in Tanzania. We had a president who was very critical, and a lot of people, surveillance, what the government used surveillance for, to look at, to surveil opponents, to surveil those who are criticizing the government, and to be able to know who are they so that they can maybe intimidate them and be able to put to rest whatever it is discussed. So I'll give you 2 examples. So during that time, the government asked the police officers to go and request for certain information from telecommunication companies in Tanzania. And they provided those information, private information that shouldn't be shared under normal circumstances. And the community questioned that practice. But telecommunication companies, they responded saying the government requested for this information and we have a duty to provide such information. That is one example. The second example I'm giving you, this is the one that I'm going to blow my trumpet, is from Jomii Forums, where I am at the moment. The government also approached Jomii Forums to provide for personal information of people who are, as I told you, this is netizen. This is a place where everybody can say anything. You can use whatever name you want to use, and nobody is going to know it's you. So it's a place where people can exercise their rights. They can say anything about the government as long as it's not illegal, and the government will not be able to know who said that. And so there were some whistleblowing about government activities, and the government, the police wanted to know who said what. They ordered release of information about these people because they are anonymous. Jomii Forum refused. The government started intimidation tactics. The executive director, he's here actually, his name is Maxence Melo, was arrested. 3 consecutive cases were filed against him, all with the same material fact. The lawyers lawyers in this room knows that you can never have 2 cases with the same evidence, same material fact, going at the same time in the court of the same jurisdiction. But there were 3 cases going at the time. To cut the long story short, at the end of the day, 2 cases, he was not found guilty of anything other than obstruction of justice, which also the prosecutor could not justify that he was obstructing justice, because he, under the laws, was justified not to release such information because the 4 requirements I mentioned here before were not met. That means he was of the right to defend these information, but regardless. So he was found not guilty, 2 of the cases. One of the cases, because something has to come out of it, he was found guilty of obstruction of justice in order to pay a fine, which he did. He is free now, but what I'm trying to illustrate here is that regardless of what we have legal frameworks, we have laws, we have organs, but who is protecting our data? These laws can be there, can provide for frameworks where a person can be able to protect their data. A person can be able to be protected against illegal surveillance, but the person who is guardian of your data, is he ready to protect, or is he ready to stand for what data protection law is providing? So here we have the telecommunication companies, and here we have Jomii Forums. Telecommunication companies, just like Jomii Forums, had personal information. Government approached them to provide this information, and they did, saying that we are obliged, although the law does not say that. And on that other end, we have Jomii Forums, which says, yes, we have personal information, we could give them to you, but provide us with justification, and We chose to protect personal information because the law gave us that power.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Boshin. I know we are running out of time. I don't know. I will want to take at least two. If you have any question for any of my panelists, because of time, I want to take 2 questions from the audience. So if you have any question, please, you can indicate by raising your hand. Just 2. All right, thank you so much. Can you pass the mic across to him?
Good afternoon, everyone. I need to know if you have solutions. For example, if a company refuses to provide details of their technological system, feeling that, first of all, they may have it in their contract, or they may feel that disclosing their technological system may result in a commercial harm for the company. I know we may talk about legal framework or laws, but the company may not be bound by such laws as compared to public authorities, for example.
I don't know who can go for that, Dr. Bosch.
I think I'll go back to what Honorable Commissioner spoke this morning.
Okay.
That, of course, yes, you sort of preempted that we will go for a framework, legal framework and stuff like that. And that's why we have the commissioner here, because when you have a right to request for certain information and the company believes that that information is incriminating to them and refused or doesn't want to share that information with you, you as a person or as a company or as a subject, you have the right to go to the commissioner who has a duty to make an assessment of whether or not this company is justified to sort of refuse to give you access. So the law will always be there. We cannot put it out of the question, but the commissioner is the person that you have to go when such situation happens, and the commissioner has power to go and demand to assess the risk and balance the rights between your rights and companies' rights.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Are you okay? Okay, have one. So please.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
I wanted to find out whether on these issues of surveillance, if there is a way we can probably make use of data protection authorities. And also asking this in light of the fact that if you look at the exemptions, some of them in our legal frameworks will border around issues of national security. And I don't know whether we can have data protection authorities coming in to assist us in that regard, especially in measuring issues of necessity, proportionality, and all that. And I also just want to check with you, colleagues, if we have a situation on the continent where there is an attempt to reform the surveillance regime. I appreciate the case in South Africa, very progressive, but do we have like an attempt of a state that is undertaking something along the lines of surveillance reform?
All right. Just quickly, Dr. Ilori, I don't know whether you can take on this question.
I'm able to respond if, with regards to, I'll start with the last and go to the first one. With regard to the reform, I don't have a specific country, but I know the Declaration of Freedom of Expression. It provides for this framework with the 4 requirements I mentioned before. I think it's section or article 42 of the declaration. The first question was? What's the question? I forgot the question.
So the second one,
the first question was about?
Yeah, whether data protection.
Yes. That is very possible, and actually that is the approach that, for example, the Council of Europe Convention advised. And if you are able to go online and look into the old draft data protection draft bill of Namibia, was the perfect example. They had under section 15, I think, a framework that provides power to the commissioner to be able to, not to be able to be within the equation when there's a surveillance, whether it's for public security, for public order. The commissioner must be able to oversee these surveillance activities, and no surveillance activities is allowed unless the Data Protection Commissioner oversees it. But unfortunately, the new draft removed that requirement, so I don't know why, but.
All right, Mr. Adeboye, in 30 seconds, because we are running out of time, 30 seconds.
All right, I just want to, the first question, there was a question that talks about how complaint complies, whether complaints will be bound by the law, but and whether legality will apply in that context. I would say I still want to go back to legality, because if you are going to sell a technology to my country, and if I have a law that says that if this type of technology is coming to my country, these are the things that needs to happen, you cannot tell me that you are not bound by that law. So whether by the home country of the person selling the technology or by the destination country, legality is still very important. It's also one of the ways in which you can find some sort of accountability around surveillance. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. I want to use this opportunity to appreciate Dr. Ilori for your time and for the wonderful input and allowing us to borrow from your wealth of knowledge. Thank you so much. And I know that this is not the end of, it's an ongoing conversation. So Dr. Bosch is here. You can reach Paradigm Initiative at any point in time. Dr. Ilori is also at our disposal at any point in time. Please, we still have the next 2 days here. We can make this a continuing conversation. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you, Dr. Lam. Thank you for coming.
Ladies and gentlemen, could we give them another round of applause? So that was quite a mouthful, right? But very interesting discussions. You agree? My audience, are we together? Are we together? I don't feel you. Are you there? Are you in the house? Okay, so next, we are going to be discussing women in privacy. And as we quickly get them ready, I just want to interest you a bit. So, women in privacy, we expect to see aspects on gender, equality, the breaches that happen, especially that target women, and the like. So, as our able moderator prepares, and the participant in this session, taking you a little bit back on the discussions on national security and surveillance. It was quite intriguing. One of our panel members telling us not to be quick to consider some of the initiatives being taken, some of the steps being done as best practices. I think that is something to think about. I think because they need to be tested. The fact that they are happening in one state, I think he was not so enthusiastic to see them as being looked at as best practices. But I think they They are good initiatives, and the emphasis in trying to bring that balance, putting us and directing us to think about considerations around conducting impact assessments, data impact assessments, effective monitoring, but also the other thing that was quite interesting was on the issue of legality versus ethical considerations, which side to take. That is also something to think about, isn't it? Hello? Yeah? Okay. So without wasting any more time, I would like to invite our moderator for the next session with discussions on women and privacy. Ladies and gentlemen. Okay, so our next moderator for the next session is here. You're most welcome.
Mba Acha Dobgima. I'm an attorney and counselor at law and also the founder of the Association of Privacy Lawyers in Africa. Today we have a special guest with us who is going to be sharing about her life journey. But before we hear about her life journey, her trajectory in her career, we have to think about what is the role that women have to play in privacy. Thinking about the advent of technology, the innovative world, digitalization, machine learning, artificial intelligence, all these things are new and emerging, and the question is, what role do women have to play in these areas? The world has made a significant improvement in the representation of women in the areas of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. But right now, we want to really ask the question, are women up to the task to be data protection commissioners? Are women up to the task to handle the challenges involved in becoming data protection officers in various companies? My guest today is a woman. She is the Data Protection Commissioner of Mauritius. She has had a trajectory in her career that is remarkable, not just in Mauritius, but across Africa. And today we have the rare and unique opportunity to take a sneak peek into her life, her journey, and to learn from everything that she has done, both successes and challenges. It's not been a smooth ride, I can tell you, but today we're going to find out. And let's put our hands together and welcome the Data Protection Commissioner of the Republic of Mauritius. I think we can do better. If there are women in the room, I think we can do better. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Mata, for joining us today. It's such an honor to have you as a pace setter to show the example, not just only to me, to your daughter, to other women, that it is possible for a woman to occupy the position that you occupy. I know you are not a stranger to a lot of people sitting in here, but please just formally introduce yourself and tell us something out of the ordinary that we don't know.
All right, okay. Thank you, Estelle. It's not our first meetups. We've been meeting online very, very often. And it was also my, my pleasure and my privilege to have you. Definitely, I think if you have called me today on stage, is because we need to send a very important message, not only to women, but also to the data protection community in Mauritius, across the region, and why not globally as well. Yes, I was appointed Data Protection Commissioner in 2007. Actually, that time, I was tasked, I was on a 1-year contract from the state law office. I'm a lawyer, by the way, and I have to be for that position. And I was tasked to set up the data protection office at that time. So my mandate was like a consultant on the project, and I had to set up the office, although I was called Data Protection Commissioner. So I came up with, devising the structure of the office that was the schemes of service for all the relevant people who will occupy the positions in the data protection office. Reviewing the law, we had our first law, which was dated in 2004. Actually, it came into force in 2009 because it was not in force all the time. And when I took that position, I made sure that it came into force, some operation sections of that law. We believe that we couldn't really make that law come into force in its entirety because there were provisions which were not compliant with the EU directive of 1996 at the time when it was drafted, which is quite logical, being given that it's an outdated piece of law. And so I operationalized the office, and I came up with the important sections into force in February 2009. So this is the date that really we started the office 2 years after that. So during these 2 years, I was doing that, that job of forming the office. And then subsequently, when we enacted the law in 2009, we started doing registrations of data controllers and processors. And at that time, we were operating under the aegis of the Prime Minister's office. And we were actually quite lucky to form part of the Prime Minister's office at that time, up to 2015, 16, something like that, when we moved to the Ministry of Information and Communication Technology. The most important aspect of this work was that data protection is still something that is unknown to the world. It's very complex, but it's also unknown. And I'm talking about 2007 when I joined. Then was the time like, I was already an international human rights expert, but I was talking to myself and saying, will that be a success? Will I be able to make it?
And it's important that you share that because many times when we're about to make a huge jump, as women, there's the voice of second guessing ourselves. And you second guess yourself for a moment. How were you able to overcome the question of, can I do this? And jump right into doing all that you have done?
Okay, first of all, I was a pioneer in the purest sense, meaning to say that I didn't have any support. I was alone in an office. I didn't have staff to start with. I had only a secretary. So I started with a secretary. And to be honest, I had to draft the law myself, like, going to get it enacted by myself and doing regulations by myself, doing guides by myself. There was no one, actually, not a single person to start. So it was basically, then I realized that you do not become a master by just preaching. You really have to invest. You really have to put your feet down and get the work done.
That's a strong one.
Yeah, and it was a strong message, and that really developed my strength. My strength lies in the fact that I am the architect of my own doings. And if I had to take responsibility, it was me taking responsibility and being accountable for what I'm doing. There was no one else to say, can I just, share the burden with you? So that was it. And when I was being criticized, I was the one being criticized. So I learned to stand on my own feet and facing the world with the confidence that what I've done is not only my doing or my creation. There are international standards. There are guidance everywhere. If you know which door to knock and the people to search for and the guidance to search for, you will get it.
Right.
Just like that, in 2014, I organized the International Conference for Data Protection and Privacy Commissioners. We started 2009. We were such a young authority. And we actually, this is not me, but all the international community who came to Mauritius, they loved it. So I think, and that was me,
Right.
right? So if there only I didn't realize that I was capable, I would never have realized that.
I think this deserves a round of applause. What do you think? I think this is a remarkable testimony, especially for women. Remember, this session is about women in privacy, and it's an opportunity for us to learn that, we have to take our own destiny into our hands and challenge ourselves and move outside our comfort zones and know that even though we don't have the necessary support, if there's knowledge, with knowledge comes confidence. I want to talk a bit about your family life, because whenever we talk about women and career, women are always associated with the home and nurturing and children and family. Do you feel like you had to sacrifice any side of that life to be where you are? If not, how did you balance it?
Yes, I do not believe in sacrificing anything for nothing. I believe that you should be able to do everything at some point in time. Women, we are multitasked. We are always moving in many directions at the same time. I might be sitting here, but I'm also thinking about what I will do at home in some minutes, what I will cook, for example. And I think that's reality, and what I need to do for my daughter after going, after living from here, and what I need to see in the family. That's how we go about, but it's about timing, right? So it's about you time it and you make it. There is nothing to be sacrificed. If the only sacrifice I can talk about is when I was traveling, going to, for example, working abroad and then coming back to Mauritius after 1 week, that was a sacrifice of time. But apart from that, being physically present, work is being done at the office right now. I am here. Okay, we've been talking since morning and we are working. The office has not stopped operations. Some of my staff are already gone. They are gone back to the office. So it's all about management, and management can only be effective. We have no right to go in management which is, ineffective. We are losing time. We're wasting resources, and that should not be the case.
That's great. Let's dispel a myth. Would you say your success is attributed to luck? Say you got lucky and you were made a consultant, or how were you put in the position at the right time to get into the space that led you here?
There was no luck involved. It's all about what we do with our own hands. There was no, to be honest, no political support behind this job. It's a public office. I'm a public officer. I had to go through interviews, and I was interviewed not once, but twice, because first time the office was on a contractual basis. After 2 years, it became permanent. I was interviewed again. I was selected again, but it's been a very transparent process for me, and I never believed in having to go and seek for any kind of favors or privileges to do what I have to do. I was already a barrister. I was a laureate at the time for my bar exams. I topped the list. I was considered to be quite brilliant at that time when I started.
You still are.
Yeah, maybe, maybe not. But this is how I started. And I was not lucky when I was appointed internationally by many organizations to work for them. And I think it's all about your doing. It's all about what your contribution is. The more you contribute, the more brilliant is the contribution, the more will you be recognized. And there is no trade-off to that. I would also say that people who think that, we should get that string pulled or that the other one to be able to reach the top, they will probably reach the top, but then it will crumble back soon to the bottom. And that's how it is. If you're not a professional of caliber, you can never vouch to be a professional in the long-term run. You will lose.
Right.
Yeah.
So to the audience, we're going to have good couple of minutes to ask questions to Ms. Madhup. So if you have questions, please prepare them. When it's time to ask questions, you could raise your hand and the MC will give you a mic. Let's shift gears a little bit.
Yeah.
The last panel that just left talked about, you knew I was not going to miss this.
I'm happy you're asking me that question.
The last panel talked about the regulator's job when questions of surveillance and overreaching steps are taken by the government.
Yes.
Every time you, as the commissioner, would have to go against the government, I don't know if you have ever done so, what is it like and what has it taken for you? Any challenges? We want to hear about the challenges first.
Yeah, definitely. If we have to talk about human rights, it's an inequality position for anyone, not only the commissioner, but anyone. The ordinary citizen is an unequal, not to say, we are not operating on a flat scale. We are all operating on horizontals and verticals and dimensionals that are not always within our capacity to control. I have my own jurisdiction, and I make sure that whatever is in the law is actually being imparted to government, to private sector, and what they do with this is their responsibility. If tomorrow the government breaches the Data Protection Act, I will definitely be saying, yes, you have done something which is not proper, and there might be consequences for that. But when we go in a court of law, as a barrister, we need to be sure of what we are bringing to court, for example, as evidence. All this matters, and if we don't have evidence, let us be very honest about it. How can we successfully win a case? It's very easy as a data protection agency with, let's say, administrative fining powers, which is very good, to fine. But in our context, it's criminal. Like in Switzerland, you heard that it's criminal. And when it's criminal, I need the collaboration of the police. I need the Director of Public Prosecutions approving prosecutions. I need the support of these people to go to court. And I'm not the only entity looking after this. So at the end of the day, it looks simple, but it's not. Fining goes fast, but criminal prosecutions, that's a weakness for criminal prosecutions as well, is that it can even take years, and it does take years in our judicial system for cases to be won. So we cannot defeat that normal procedure, and that's how it goes. But if you want to go fast in the data protection world, I will seriously advise data protection agencies to go for findings, like the European context, like Kenya is doing, good. But at the same time, fining relates, to imposition of monetary considerations and damages, etc. But criminal is actually more serious than this. It goes even to, like I said this morning, closing down your business. And that is really serious. But until and unless we have the willingness, not only data protection, but our courts, our whole system has the willingness to make sure that, we are all joining our hands together to make this case successful, it won't be the case. But we have certain cases in Mauritius, for example, which have gone to the UN Human Rights Committee regarding our national identity card. There are movements like this coming, and we are also being very, very actively engaged in promoting a data protection culture and coming with enforcement, which is quite serious in the months to come.
So there are some countries that don't have an independence of branches, like Mauritius. So the judiciary and the executive and even the legislature is commingled.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to a woman or just anybody who finds themselves working in the same space of data protection and privacy, but there is no independence of power, and they have to defend the rights of the people against the government? It's a tough spot. What's your word of wisdom?
My word will be that will not work out. Without independence, she or any commissioner will not be able to do what is required. It will be just like a dormant institution, unfortunately, because without independence, if I wasn't independent, I would have probably been thrown out of the job. I would probably, been criticized or been brought to task in courts if I wasn't independent. But if I was dependent on government, that is, I would be a person who will be talking only government's language.
Gender.
Or if I was just a person right here, maybe I would be joining hands with private sector only and looking only after my interests. But that's the balance, that's the equilibrium that we need to find in these types of positions. We believe that it's a public office. For example, in our case, that is, we are public officials and we are just having to abide to government rules. It's not anti-government. It's about the way you're doing things. There are strategies and policies that even governments have to respect. If you want to abide to the international community principles, even governments have to abide to them. It's not only about data protection. It's also about government's commitment internationally and what the government's commitment to the people. They may look like they are theoretical, but they are not. They were talking about legality. Definitely, it's about legality. Everything has to go according to laws, whether it's local, whether it's regional commitments, whether it's international commitments.
That's right, absolutely. In terms of success, because you've highlighted a couple of things, your independence and how that has empowered you to the work that you do. I want us to touch a bit about your successes in this office, something that when you sleep at night and think about having been done under your leadership is your beam of pride.
You see, I have been involved in many, many innovative projects. It's true that at night I reflect, and this is when these brilliant ideas come out of my mind. And to be honest, I have done things just like that, just thinking, oh, I need to do this. I need to produce a guide on this, and I do it. I need to produce a self-training toolkit, and I do it. I get the right collaborators and I get my ideas on it, and it's done. It's just the formulation of ideas. What we're lacking in our community, professional community, is creativity, right? We tend to think that, okay, we are professionals, we just have to follow X, Y, and Z, and that's it. No, we are lacking creativity. We need to create. If we stop creating, then definitely we will just be followers. And being followers, there's a big price and a huge price that we pay, is that we are actually just giving management a sort of stereotyped way of management. And as you know, it evolves day by day. And if we don't update ourselves, if we don't bring in our own ideas, our own contribution, we are not going to stand the way very far, especially in privacy, because privacy is such a piece of law where you update yourself every second. Technology is like that, and we have to do it like the way technology is evolving. We have to update our knowledge of the law and see the weaknesses in the law and try to bring in new elements in the law to be able to counteract these situations, or make soft laws through guides, like we do a lot, so that we're able to, condense the weaknesses and create some mitigating effects for these new technologies that we have not catered for.
As I listen to Ms. Madhop, I'm thinking through my own career, my own journey, about the importance of being creative and not just being a follower, but to think about how we can make things better. Patricia and I were talking about this some few hours before we came in, the importance of thinking outside the box. And I encourage you, as you're listening through this session as a woman in privacy, to think about what ways you can be innovative. We've talked about the good. Let's talk a little bit about the bad. What is something that honestly and genuinely, if you had a clean slate, you would do it differently?
If I had a clean slate, I would definitely be the person who will be prosecuting many people.
You got a chuckle.
I would certainly be prosecuting many people. Because, you see, enforcement is not only in data protection, the regulator's role. When you look at this Data Protection Act, you look at it very carefully. It tells you, you have the responsibility, you are accountable, you and you. That is you who are processing the data. So we have shifted that burden very intentionally to the people who are handling the data. Why? Because it makes sense that if you are handling the data, you should be able to mitigate the risks that are associated with handling it. And if you don't do it, again, logically, it's your responsibility. It's not the regulator, for example, in our context right now. People tell me, oh, we don't know, we have to be registered with your office. Oh, is there a data protection office in Mauritius? Oh, you are the commissioner? After 15, 16 years of existence, even a dog will recognize that we exist. What I mean to say very bluntly is that this is not a game to be played. Definitely not. You know we exist, you know what we do, essentially. You know you have to register, so that's the clean slate. Come and register with us, not to be prosecuted.
So you have your passions around this subject, and it's clear and evident for everyone to see that it's something you're very passionate about.
Yeah.
A lot of African countries have enacted these laws for a business purpose because they want to ensure that there's transactions cross borders. Others have taken the approach of human rights. What is the basis of your passion in this area of work?
Great. We need to balance these two very important interests. Economic interests are very important for the survival of business in a country. We acknowledge that and we appreciate the collaboration of the industry in making that happen in any country. But people are also important. And it's not only about human rights activism, like being militants or like they label human rights defenders to be the people, sometimes who live in a different world and not realistic. No. If you believe, let's put it that way, it's a very extreme example. I was seeing on the social networks media, Lady Gaga saying, I sold my soul to, to Satan or whatever. You see, the point here is that you should not be selling your soul to no one. You should be doing your stuff the way you are supposed to do it. And that's not taught. That's something which is innate. It's natural. If you know what you have to do, you will do it. But if you don't know what you are doing, means you are not in the right place. That's not your job. Maybe you're supposed to be an astronaut, but you happen to be a lawyer, right? And you are actually thinking in an astronaut way, but actually this is not the legal world. So we're living in different worlds in our world. And these worlds sometimes are not being connected. The dots are not being connected. But in privacy, in data protection, this is an area of law which makes sure that all laws are dotted together. That's the beauty of data protection. I can talk about finance. I did. I can talk about health. I can talk about education. I can talk about anything because I need to master everything. It's not just trade. It's actually mastering everything to make sense in this. Because no one knew, for example, even the financial regulators did not know that data protection is impacting on them. Surveillance oversight agencies didn't know, law enforcement agencies didn't know, but now they know. But the way we work is that we are actually like a guru. We are indeed masters. We are a guru in this world to tell you how to navigate your steps in making information viable. So this is what we are doing in every sphere. So are we not cross-sectoral, I mean, touching each and every bit of our society, including the people, their interests. At the end of the day, this is the balance, right? We are bringing a beautiful balance to this world, which is imbalanced.
Oh, that's beautiful, the way you coin it. That's actually really very thoughtful and insightful as you share it. I have two more questions for Ms. Madop, and then I'll open it up to the floor. I want us to talk about diversity and inclusion of women in the space of data protection and privacy. We have seen there's a lot of women who are data protection commissioners in the southern and eastern part of Africa. But our counterparts from the West, are lagging behind.
Wild, Wild West.
Yeah. She says, Wild, Wild West. Can you share with us what is your agenda, maybe, or something you have thought about, maybe, for the West and the North, to bring up to speed like the South and the East have, where women are occupying these positions and leading the way, and it's not so in other African countries?
Yeah, definitely. What I feel sorry for my African continent is that we are so diverse in a way in terms of economic power. I will not talk about cultures. We respect all our cultures. They are very dear to us, and we really, really think they are sacred. But economic imbalances has brought Africa to a standpoint where we, educated people, are sometimes being defeated by these, super powers, super economic forces. It's not only about women here, it's about how we inculcate education in a country. What is our critical infrastructure? When we are sitting in a place where we don't have food and we don't have the basic amenities like water, electricity, who will be able to bring the cause further? We are only talking about the basics. That is, we're talking about the world, a world which is neglected all the time. So bringing in these types of legislations, women empowerment is not a thing that will work in that context. So the context differs from place to place, and we have to touch those contexts where we are relevant. That is where we need, for example, data protection law. Not every African country needs data protection laws. Let's be honest about it. Let's come up to a level, and that's our governments working together. Let's come up to a level where we can actually respect each other, and then we build another foundation, and that is how we go and elevate ourselves. But if we don't have basics, there's no point. There's no point in making any discourse. That's how I feel sorry for the African continent. But I've seen many countries who have done very good efforts in making good data protection frameworks. We have been benchmarking many African countries. The list is quite impressive, including to some extent Kenya. We have been working together, advising them as to how to promote a good data protection culture in Africa. I think that's the way forward. We all come together. That's why we are here today. We are all joining our hands in collaboration, and I think we're doing a very good job. Right now, some countries in Africa are doing a very good job for data protection.
What will it take to have you as a consultant? I know I've asked you this question personally, but for the sake of the audience, what will it take to have you as DPC of Mauritius fly over to another country and help them?
I did that for Rwanda. Uganda came to us, Seychelles came to us, Ivory Coast came to us, Tanzania, we did it online, and some other countries as well. We have just signed a cooperation agreement with the South African Information Regulator, dating back to June 2023. And we are working together. So definitely I do go abroad. I have worked for example, for Interpol on consultancy basis. I have worked for the UN for consultancy basis. Now OECD, perhaps to some extent. We are also being given that we have ratified Council of Europe Convention. We are working with the Council of Europe, with the EU for the EU Adequacy Project. We are not leaving anyone behind. They are all on the same boat.
Awesome, that's amazing. I believe we have thousands of questions.
I'm not too sure about this.
Do we have any questions from the audience? This is the time.
Okay, don't be scared of me, I don't bite. All right, okay, yes, thank you.
I'm a bit curious, being a woman as well. You said, and you both agree that it's important to be innovative, to be able to, fly high in your profession. Being a mother, being a wife, being the commissioner, how do you clear your mind? How do you get that clarity to be able, because innovation requires clarity of mind. How or what do you do to have that clarity of mind and be able to be innovative?
Yeah, all right. May I, Excel?
Sure, please.
Yeah, I wanted to keep a surprise for you, but I think I'll have to tell you that. Yes, you have to clear your mind, and that's very important. But it all depends on what type of person you are inside of you to be able to clear your mind. That's a big challenge, isn't it? So how I do it is recently, I believe a lot about reflections on life. I have written a book on life philosophy, and I write quotes and sayings and poems, but on life, as practical as it is, as harsh as it is. And I will be showing you that book on the third day of this conference. It's definitely something that was dear to my heart, because I said to myself, should I be leaving this world anytime? Yeah, probably I'll get myself cloned. I'll get myself an AI version. But if I happen to leave this world, then definitely, have I served a purpose on this planet? And that's my legacy. That's what I wrote in this book. And I will definitely be sharing with you what it is about. Thank you for that question. It touches straight into my private life.
There's a question. Yes, sure.
Yes, I'm Patrick Pennings from the Council of Europe, and Commissioner, thank you first of all, because you've been a driving force for Mauritius to join the Convention 108 and all the work that's been done on the modernized convention, so thank you for that. I had a question, and that is, I'm not going to say because you're a woman, because I hope that also fathers have a responsibility in family and in cooking and in whatever you like.
Yes.
At least it's my responsibility. But my question to you is really, to which extent, how do you balance the national work, the work at the national level, with the many commitments that you have just enumerated at an international level? And how is it mutually reinforcing, or is it distracting?
Yes. The answer is, without international support, I wouldn't be here. I would have resigned from my post, to be honest, because to educate a country is not only the work of a data protection regulator or agency. It's, as I said, it's all of us coming together to actually achieve the purpose that we're looking for. But if I didn't have support from Council of Europe, from UN, from EU, from many other African brothers and sisters and organizations, it would have been clearly impossible to go about this journey. Definitely, yes, I was the one driving the projects, but I bow and with respect to each and every organization which has contributed not only to me directly, but to the world through the whole guidance, for example, Council of Europe has been given. the whole guidance that, you know, EU is producing, the whole set of laws, we all agree that laws, you know, sometimes are very complicated, but the idea is not the end product that we are showing. The idea is, what are we trying to do? What are the efforts that we are putting to ensure that at least we're bringing a foundational block in that area? And I think that's what is important in the work that we are doing. And I will always continue to work with all my peers, because that's the future for privacy. And there is, for example, it happened to me through a joint investigation in the Cambridge Analytica case. We had to make investigations and we had to seek the data protection authorities helping us in understanding what's happening, how to protect data. And we definitely had collaboration. And I think if we come together, this community as one force that is one, and that is one power, we are going to go beyond, that is supranational. And that is what I dream to see in the privacy world, is that these laws become more powerful than local governments, local forces, whatever name you give it. That's what we're looking for. And I hope to see a human instrument. I hope to see something coming from these quarters to show us that, yes, we can proceed with our journey because we are in safe hands. Even regulators are being threatened nowadays. So thank you for that, Patrick. Thank you.
It's an amazing question. Brilliant. We have another question.
One last question.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much. My question is, how are you able, as a woman, to keep afloat in the presence of where we have major patriarchal issues, especially with the position that you hold and the role that you play? How are you able to keep up there and not actually shatter at the end of that day? Yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think we've been talking a lot about ethics, about professional values. And I think the lesser opportunity you give to your opponent to criticize you is a measurement of success in what you're doing. That is, the more professional you are, the more effective you are, the lesser is the possibility for your opponent to attack you. And that in a patriarchal society, even in Mauritius, we are living in a patriarchal society because we've got values which are very entrenched. Women are sometimes seen as idiots, sorry for the expression, but true. Men trying sometimes in our societies, proving themselves to be better. Not proving, they don't have to prove actually. I'm not being a feminist, but that's a part of my reality that I'm talking about, unfortunately. Like they don't need to do anything, but they are, you know, they are given opportunities. For us, we have to fight for these opportunities. We have to show and prove ourselves to a level which is sometimes beyond imagination, to be able to show that we can also perform the same type of activity. And at the end of the day, when after 25 years in the profession, in the legal profession, and as commissioner, as state counsel, I have told myself, and in a very honest way, saying, I will not be the person to be compared to someone else. Even though I'm not perfect, and I don't need to be, but I'm not to be compared. If you like what I'm doing, it's fine. If you don't like, you come with constructive criticism, and we improve, we progress. But I don't need to be compared, and I'm not in competition with no one.
Amazing. We have a question that came from online. If you have one, just put up your hand and they'll give you the mic. But the question that came online is, how can you be effective allies to women?
Okay. How can I actually support women?
Correct. I think that's the
if you look at my office structure, 95% of my staff is women. It's not because I favored them, it's because they deserved to be working in that environment. And I have very good support from my women colleagues, because I think there's a flow which goes quite fast between women. We don't need to speak too much and they understand. But with a man, I have to explain. Sorry to say that, but that's how it is. But it's true. I've been, sometimes I don't even need to say, I look at my CS and she understands. So these are things that we develop with a woman. I think it's genetic. But then I have always been an effective, or as you say, an ally for women. But I also believe that professionals are professionals, whether you are a woman, whether you are a man. I will never favor a woman for a man who is more professional or more competent. I will never do that, because we are supposed to be neutral, right? We're supposed to be gender neutral. But if there are unfairness, to a woman, situations where she does not deserve to be treated the way she is, I will definitely bring my voice out. And I did it in my own case. There were people who were not treating me too well, and I did voice out my concerns, and I went to the authorities and I complained. I had to do it. It's not something that many people like, and some people are still, thinking this woman is a bit too strong. But to survive, if we need to do that, we have to.
Throughout this session, you've talked about some character attributes, like knowing what you want, thinking outside the box. But I want you to talk about your courage, your determination, and some other attributes that have favored you or which you have implemented, self-developed, that have helped you, just so that you can share that with the audience. So if there's anybody who needs to do some self-development, they will know where to point out. Is it courage? Is it boldness? Is it fearlessness? What are some of those character attributes?
It's consistency. It's discipline. And it's definitely courage. We need courage. And we are always showing courage at every point of the day, in our lives, every day. We show courage. We show courage to wake up. We show courage to come. And we are actually training ourselves in a very robotic way. We're believing, sometimes I see people, preaching to you, telling you, you should do this, 7 laws of effective management, etc. I'm not criticizing any writer, but I'm just saying that this is his experience. It's good to learn from experience of others, but you need to create your own experience, and your experience is unique. There is no two-person like you, in the sense, let's say a lawyer here and a lawyer next to you having the same experience. No. So we are unique in our ways, in the way we handle things. So if we are unique, it means we have to exploit these uniqueness, these gifts that we have in us that we don't realize we have. We need to exploit them. And to do that, it's really an internal work, internal cleansing, internal machinery that probably your subconscious mind, and you're not aware of it, but it's here. And just like we talk about the memory cards in computers, we have our own here, and we have to bring in elements in it to be able to make it work in a way which is going to give more clarity to what we are doing. So the work is you and you. It's neither you and the other. It's always you and yourself. So the point is, if you realize immense capacity that you have inside you and you bring it out to the world, although to say that you're just bringing perhaps 1% of it and not the 9%, but still, if you're able to bring just 1% of it, that's a win.
Amazing. Do we have any other questions? We have time for one more question.
I think we're done with philosophy for today.
Philosophy that is much needed.
Yeah.
So let's wrap up with this question about a woman who wants to be a leader in the area of privacy. What are your parting words of wisdom? How can she position herself based on everything that you know and you recommend to be able to succeed in the area of data protection and privacy?
I didn't want to become a leader. I'm not being humble here. I didn't want to become a leader. I always lead, and that's it. I always lead in what I do. If I don't lead, I will definitely be saying to myself, there's something wrong that you're doing. Because you need to excel to be able to bring, how do you call it, persuasion to what you're doing. It's a highly competitive world. Question of survival or the fittest and or the best. And if I don't excel, means I'm not in my right place and I have to go. So I have to excel. There is no way out.
Amazing. I said last question, but there's one more. One more.
Right, okay.
What's your vision for 5 years to come? It's important that we do a vision casting before we let you go.
Okay, for Africa?
For Mauritius and then for Africa.
I have already planned the vision for Mauritius for the next coming 5 years. And I have one last project, and I said it already, the EU Adequacy Project. And then when we are fully in line with international standards, we're coming with further regulations in different sectors for Mauritian, let's say AI or other components. We are working on this. We are trying the soft law approach for guides and then slowly moving on to legislations, being inspired by what's happening across the world as well. That's the plan for Mauritius. And definitely, I will make it a reality for Mauritius that it is positioned, if not already, as one of the leading countries in data protection in the world.
Amazing. This was a great session. This was wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing your words of wisdom. If there's anything that I gathered from today is to think outside of the box, to be courageous, to be innovative, to go after what I want, to create my own unique experiences, because everyone's life is unique and special. Thank you so much, Ms. Madhop. We have enjoyed this wonderful time with you.
Thank you.
In this session of Women in Privacy. Can we put our hands together?
Thank you, Estelle. It was wonderful having to talk to you today. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, wow. Wasn't that wow? I don't hear you. Wasn't that wow? Can we just give another round of applause to these two beautiful ladies? I don't know what to say, to be honest. It has been a mouthful. I don't know about you, but definitely there are things to pick, to learn from, and we are really humbled and privileged to hear such immense experience, and which is inspiring, especially for women to play a more active role as we embrace the digital era. There's a short message that we are going to listen to as we draw down to the end of our day one. And if it is ready, please let's have it. So as we wait for it, yes, I just want us to dwell a bit on the meetup. Some of the things that I personally also take home is courage. the consistency, but also the proactiveness that is being exhibited by the data office under the good leadership of Ms. Madap. The network, that one was also very, very interesting. Something that I think we should think about to take home, especially if we are going to build a movement of data protection officers. That platform, I think, is something that would take us very far in engaging deeply, but also collaboratively and building synergies around data protection and ensuring that our rights to privacy are respected. So ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, I want to usher you into a small message for you. Okay. So as we wrap up, I just want to highlight what we are going to have tomorrow. For tomorrow, we still have master classes to commence our day. We will be having education and IT. So we welcome you to keep time. We start at 8:30, end at 9:30 for us to convene once again into this bigger room. So ladies and gentlemen, we want to thank you so much for your participation, for your active questions that you have shared in the plenary. And I encourage you to continue with the same spirit and vigor tomorrow. Ladies and gentlemen, you're welcome to leave at leisure.